Good morning. This is Rita Riccardi, Director of Retirement Plans for Fiduciary Pension Partners. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our Secure Act 2.0 webinar, where we will reveal the latest updates and provisions that will impact plan administration. At Fiduciary Pension Partners, we are a full-service pension consulting firm. We offer fiduciary support, fee benchmarking, target date fund consulting, and plan design assessments to enhance participant retirement outcomes. Please check out our YouTube channel, Fiduciary Pension Partners, where you can access all of our top webinars. Today's webinar is being presented by Stephen Puckett, Managing Partner at Fiduciary Pension Partners. Steve has over 30 years of experience in the retirement industry and has been named as one of the nation's top advisors by the Financial Times for the past 6 years. Steve is joined today by Ruben Gonzalez, Senior Director, Retirement Director at Janus Henderson Investors. Ruben has been in the industry for over 20 years and has extensive knowledge of qualified plans in the retirement industry, and he assists plan sponsors and advisors with their retirement plan objectives and concerns. We are thrilled to have Ruben join us, and now I would like to turn it over to Steve and Ruben.
Thank you very much, Rita. Again, thank you very much, Ruben, for joining us. Again, in this presentation, we want to cover the changes and the FAQs that have come from the Secure Act. There has been several bulletins and updates from the original Secure Act that we will be covering today in today's presentation.
And also, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's time together counts as 1 hour of CE, continuing education. If you have HRCI, SHRM, SHRM, GPHR, SPHR, and also for CPA, CPE as well. If you're interested in receiving 1 credit hour for today, please let Rita or Steve know. So
Thank you. And we will be recording this presentation, so we will be muting all the lines, and we will open up the lines at the end of the presentation for questions. There is also a chat feature that you can chat us a question as well. Thank you very much.
So, as Steve mentioned, we have a lot to cover in a short bit of time, but I thought we'd start with sort of a review. Secure 2.0, as everyone at this point is aware, was a huge negotiation between the government. It's a part of a 10-year budget plan. So a lot of the quirkiness that we're going to talk about today is really the result of compromise, the horse trading that goes on in government. We have 92 provisions, not all of them mandatory. We'll get into some of those. And as of 2024, the IRS and the DOL have issued guidance on a number of some of these provisions, which we'll go through with you as well. So we'll start here on what the IRS has, the guidance that the IRS has issued. If you're interested, you can always Google IRS Notice 2024-2. And in it, they're giving further guidance on de minimis financial benefits, right? So now we can sort of pay participants to encourage them to enroll in the plan. The big question was, how much can a plan sponsor? What's the monetary value on that encouragement, if you will? It has to be less than $250. So if you're thinking about doing something like that, that's sort of the guideline for you. Also, plan amendment deadlines, they were extended to December 31st of 2028. So we have some time there. Roth matching and non-elective contribution options. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. Also, there's clarification on terminal illness distributions. What's the criteria there? Also, self-correction and auto enrollment. And we won't touch on this too much, but new plan auto enrollment mandatory requirements as well.
And again, just to share, for the plan amendments deadline that has been extended, but again, if you are implementing any of the voluntary features, again, plan on implementing them and with a good faith that you will be using those over the next 4 years. So again, even though the plan documents don't need to be amended until 2028, again, make sure that you plan accordingly.
Well said, yeah. So the Department of Labor also issued some guidance on auto portability. Yeah, no surprise to anyone on this call that, small account balances are the bane to many plan sponsors, right? Especially if you have a large employee head count. So starting in this year, Secure 2.0 will simplify that process of rolling over into retirement accounts, IRAs, for example. And in it, the value you can now transfer up to $5,000. Before you can only transfer up to 5,000. So the new number is $7,000. But there's some caveats, right? So your plan has to allow for it, number one. And number two, you have to follow the required number of notices and attempts to reach out to these participants. Okay. The other
And
interesting
another
thing,
part of this auto portability, if you remember, the Secure Act said that the EBSA would be creating a lost and found starting plan years of January 1st of 2025. The EBSA is currently taking opinions and currently are in the opinion stage where you can ask them about anything about the lost and found. It appears that lost and found will not be up and running by January of 2025. It's been pushed back, or I think it will be pushed back. But again, the idea is that there will be a lost and found where participants from prior 401k providers could look up their information, see if they do have any of those monies that have been lost from previous 401k providers.
no, it's a great
And again,
point.
the auto portability is being driven, by the larger record keepers, where they want to make it more seamless of transferring those IRAs and limiting the amount that get into that lost and found.
And also, just to note here that Secure 2.0 will allow either plan sponsors or record keepers to charge a fee in connection with executing the auto portability transaction into these what they consider safe harbor IRAs. So something to be aware of there. Next up, we have employee savings accounts. And it, I'm sure, Steve could elaborate a lot more, but I certainly hear a lot from plan sponsors. I work with a lot of SHRM groups, and there are a lot of questions about what these employee savings accounts can do, what they can't do. Formerly, they're called pension-linked emergency savings accounts, and they essentially allow an employee to contribute money to an account that's attached to the 401k plan. For any unforeseen financial hardships. No surprise to anyone on the call, the average American cannot come up with $400 in an emergency. They end up going to their 401k plan, treating it as a piggy bank of sorts. And so everyone wants to avoid this. So eligible participants can now contribute up to $2,500 on an after-tax basis. So this would be considered a Roth contribution into these emergency savings accounts that are linked to the plan. Now, a couple of things that come up, because I know a lot of plan sponsors are concerned, how do we treat this emergency savings account? So although the $2,500 is held in a separate account, keep in mind that money's still subject to all the protections of ERISA. In other words, you have to act in the best interest of the participant and their beneficiaries, right? Also, contributions must be deposited at the same time as any elective deferrals that employee may make. A plan may not require a minimum contribution per pay period. That's at the discretion of the participant. Also, and I thought this was interesting, the investments cannot have any type of liquidity restraint. Okay, so in other words, no real estate investment trust. I think that's common sense for most people. But here's where it gets interesting. Your QDIA is not an appropriate holding investment for the emergency savings account. Most target date funds fluctuate relative to what the markets are doing. According to DOL, they prefer you use what's considered or called a limited duration QDIA. So think your stable value fund, right? It has to have a stable net asset value. And that would be an appropriate investment option for the emergency savings accounts.
Yes, and a couple of quick, from Main Street with regard to these emergency savings accounts. Most record keepers have not implemented a solution here. So again, the clarity is, the employee can access this money at least once per month. If you do have an employer match, you would have to match these emergency savings accounts. But realistically, no record keeper has a solution. Talk to Fidelity's senior management. Fidelity is actually not going to be launching an emergency savings account vehicle. They actually are going to be launching a voluntary savings account that any of the participants wanted to voluntarily have a Fidelity bank account. They could have it. And again, that's Fidelity's way of increasing their exposure to those participants. But they're not going to have an emergency savings account solution. Other providers like Ascensus and Empower are actively looking at having emergency savings solutions, but they currently don't have anything currently. So those are slated to be launched in third or fourth quarter of this year. And again, each of your service providers have a unique way of answering. Again, we'd be more than happy to help, again, navigate down that path for you if this is something you are interested in.
Well said, Steve. Yeah, the record keeping is the bear here, obviously for many. So this is a sort of a reminder slide. Mandatory automatic enrollment escalation. I know everyone here has an established 401k plan, but I wanted to show this slide to just sort of give you sort of some color around this. So if you're a new plan, you have to auto enroll folks at 3% with an auto escalation of 1% up to a maximum of 15. I think many, if not most of you, have something similar. But I look at a lot of studies at Janus Henderson, and I'll quote too Vanguard and Fidelity because they have the majority or lion's share of 401k plans on their record keeping system. And all of these studies say the same thing. How quickly a plan sponsor can get a participant to that 15% of salary deferral bodes well for that individual's retirement readiness. And so what we're seeing now, instead of a 3% deferral, we're seeing a lot of plans or plan sponsors automatically default folks at a 5% level or higher. Or if the auto escalation isn't 1, it's maybe 2 or 3 per year, just in an effort to get folks up to that 15% salary deferral again as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and again, this is basically what the government, what the DOL, what the EBSA is wanting. So again, if your plan doesn't have a cap as high as 10 or 15%, or doesn't have 3 to 6% automatic enrollment, you may want to think about that, because that is where the government is encouraging organizations to get to.
Yeah, and one last point on this, Steve. Those Vanguard and Fidelity study, they all say drive home the point that people are worried. Well, if I go up to 15% salary deferral rate, everyone's going to default out or opt out of auto enrollment. All the studies, Fidelity, Vanguard, others say you start to see meaningful opt out of auto enrollment at around the 15% mark. So you can go up to 15%, and then you'll start to see a higher opt-out rate at that point. So next up, we have the IRS self-correction provision here for auto enrollment failures. So it's important to note this is effective for 2024, and it's set to expire December 31st of 2024. I view this as sort of a beta run for the IRS. They may keep it around at the end of next year, but as of now, it expires December 31st. And basically, as long as you correct, or you have 9.5 months after a violation to correct the auto enrollment violation, so that way your plan remains qualified.
Yeah, and with this forced auto enroll, again, we are seeing more problems happen, specifically from these smaller payroll companies, where if you are using a regional or a local payroll provider, again, many times that might inadvertently miss those first couple of pay periods with regard to auto enroll. So again, like Ruben mentioned, this is for 2024, but our guess is it probably will stay permanent because of the auto enroll feature.
Next up, we have our expansion of Roth treatment and catch-up contributions. So again, this is one of those compromise provisions, which is why it's so complex, right? So we have another layer of catch-up contributions, as you know. So this only impacts employees who are 60, 61, 62, and 63. They're able to make an additional catch-up of $10,000 this year in 2024. Next year, 2025, the limit's going to be 150% of the regular catch-up amount. And this applies to both 401ks and 403bs. You also have participants who have simple IRAs can contribute as well. Existing catch-up contributions for employees 50 and older, that remains in place, so no news there. And although the IRA catch-up contribution was left unchanged, so it's still $1,000, it will be indexed for inflation on a go-forward basis. Our third bullet here, any catch-up contributions for those 50 and over, for participants who make over $145,000 in FICA, this is the prior year, of course, subject to the Roth post-tax treatment effective essentially January 1st of 2026. So plans that allow catch-up contributions must now allow for Roth contributions. So important to note that. And this is, again, mandatory if you have a 401k plan, a 403b plan, or even a governmental 457b plan. We are expecting more guidance from the regulatory bodies shortly on this throughout this year, and we'll certainly keep you updated as that happens.
Yeah, so again, a lot to digest on this page. So, the last bullet point obviously caused the biggest concern 6, 9, 12 months ago. Plans, first off, that didn't offer Roth needed to amend their plan document to allow Roth. Again, how do we calculate that 145? Again, we had clarification of, FICA. That got pushed back 2 years. But again, remember that provision basically paid for the entire bill. So the 10-year budgeting, a lot of it came from the Rothification of the age 50 catch-up. So again, the government, this pays for the whole Secure Act. So we do anticipate this going forward. Again, the enhanced catch-up, again, only makes sense if that is forced to be in the Roth. Because if your enhanced catch-up is done on a pre-tax basis, well, the government doesn't get their taxes. So that is their concern. So again, I think both parts of this provision, again, will need to be looked at, and we will have more clarification on both of these. But it is scheduled to be 2025, this enhanced catch-up, plus the Roth mandatory catch-up starting in 2026. So again, more to hear from here. But again, these issues we have, payroll companies, again, they're not able to track or cap the enhanced catch-up amount. So they're needing to reconfigure their entire payroll codes. 401k companies are having issues with how do they cap it. Again, being able to track this age band plus the catch-up band. It's not as easy as DC thought. DC thought that this was easy programming, but it's not. So again, this is something that we're going to find out more from your payroll company, more from your service provider. At this point, we do not have any service providers that are able to do the enhanced catch-up currently, but we will hear more coming down, especially toward the end of this year.
Yeah, Steve, it's interesting how the government used this to pay for Secure 2.0. And in my mind, the issue then becomes, as more and more people have assets that are growing in these tax-free accounts, at what point do they start looking at Roth? So more to come on that.
Agree.
Next up, we have some retirement plan distributions. We have a few of them, right? So we have this new emergency withdrawal provision. It's only limited up to $1,000, and it'll be available to employees starting this year. And distributions must be repaid within 3 years, or no further emergency distributions can be made until it's paid off. The good news for plan sponsors is you don't have to certify this. Participants will self-certify this. And so the question becomes, what's an emergency? How do we define it? And it's any unforeseeable or foreseeable or immediate financial need relating to necessary personal or family emergency expenses. So we have that as sort of our barometer to gauge it. Also, for your employees who are paying for long-term care premiums, they'll be able to withdraw $2,500 a year to pay for those premiums as well. So good news there.
Yeah, and as we go through more of these distributions, I know the next page we'll talk about domestic abuse. Again, all of these distributions are voluntary. All of them, again, we see as leakage out of the plan. Again, when we have plans that offer multiple loans, 5, 7, 10 loans, we tend to see the same population base, those 3 to 5 employees that are constantly using this as a Christmas club, pulling money out as fast as they can. So unless you specifically want domestic abuse or even long-term care, we would recommend against offering these. These are, again, are just more opportunity for those tiny population of your employees, those that are living paycheck to paycheck, or wanting to get that money. So we would recommend against these unless absolutely you are looking to add very specific ones as well.
So long-term part-time employees. Yeah, it's quite the provision. Like, gets lots of questions, as you would imagine. So how do we define it? Long-term part-time employees have to have worked at least 500 hours per year for 3 consecutive years to contribute to a retirement plan, right? So on January 1st of 2025, the definition of long-term part-time employees will be changed to part-time employees who worked at least 500 hours in each of 2 consecutive years. And that coverage is expanded not only for 401k plans, but 403b plans as well. Important to note that the 3-year rule applies to plan years beginning 2024, and the new 2-year rule would apply for plan years beginning in 2025. So LTPT employee eligibility for 2024 it will be determined by tracking hours worked since January 1st of 2021. And of course, the IRS has issued a proposed regulation providing guidance on this provision as well. We're happy to send that to you if you're interested.
Yes, and Ruben, this is a provision that has gotten a lot of our clients questions. And what we're seeing is there's certainly several ways to address this. Remember, even though those long-term part-time employees must be eligible for the plan, it doesn't mean they're eligible for the employer match or profit share. Again, this just means if they work 500 hours, they are eligible to participate in the plan. The match eligibility can be completely separate. So again, many organizations are basically just saying eligibility to enroll could be immediate. Again, then you no longer have to track part-time 500 hours. If everyone's eligible immediately, then that removes that onerous to track those hours. So a lot of organizations are just saying, hey, we're going to make eligibility immediately for elective deferrals. Our match will still have that, 6-month or 12-month 1 hour restriction. But again, that's something that you may want to look at again, or, again, if you don't want to track it for everyone, just make the eligibility less than 500 hours, and then everyone will be basically on the same footing.
Thank you for that. Some other quick, and I'll just touch on this briefly, enhancements of 403b plans. Previously, if you're a 403b provider, you were not permitted to join a multiple employer pension or a pooled employer pension. Secure 2.0 has removed those limitations for you. And lastly, in terms of offering cheaper versions of your favorite mutual fund, CITs, Collective Investment Trust, we're still waiting for clarification on that. It's going through the process, and we should get an answer sometime this year is the expectation.
Absolutely. Would not change anything on that as well.
So permitting employer matching contributions based on student loan payments. Recall this came out of the famous private letter ruling for Abbott Labs, right? So they had a large student population overwhelmed by student debt. people were not contributing to the 401k plan for this reason. And so they asked the IRS if they could go ahead and match any of their employees who was paying more than 3% of their pay towards student loan debt. Government liked this idea. And so it's in Secure Act 2.0. This is a provision that you can take advantage of. And so, you know, what's a qualified student loan payment? Because I get that question a lot. It's basically defined as any indebtedness due to incurred by employees solely to pay for higher education expenses. So relatively broad.
Yeah, and we get a lot of questions on this as well. Again, our organizations that recruit college grads, architectural firms, medical practices, biotech, where they like the idea of this student loan matching program. Again, some service providers have this availability currently. Fidelity is one that has incorporated a student debt repayment program through their 401k PSW system. Other service providers like Census, like ADP, like Empower are leveraging third-party vendors that have student debt programs. Again, and remember, this doesn't necessarily have to be part of your 401k plan. We have some clients that have been just launching this separately. There's organizations like GradFin, Candidly, Peanut Butter, where they are standalone student debt repayment programs, where you could have it just as a separate program and have it nothing to do with your 401k plan. That's in fact what we would recommend. Again, those student debt programs can be anything of, paying $100 per month per employee, up to a cap. They also have loan origination, and they also have consolidation, where if you have employees that have multiple loans, they could consolidate those loans. Again, these separate programs, they do tie into your payroll. So many times the loan amounts and the loan terms are more favorable for your employees than they would if they went to their bank themselves. So organizations are launching this. Again, it's not right for everyone. Again, there is also this have and have not program where, the people that have already paid off their student debt, they're losing, they don't get this benefit. But again, we would recommend, if you are interested in this, we'd be more than happy to walk you through alternatives. And again, this might be something you may want to put in on the side of your 401k plan, as opposed to putting it into the 401k plan. Again, we are seeing clients that do have this. It does open up some questions when it comes to the plan audit, and it has created additional concerns and additional costs from those auditors, because now they're basically reviewing these matching contributions as well. So it does add a level of cost. So it might be something you may want to look at, but there are alternatives and there are options that you can look at.
Enhanced saver credit. This is an attempt essentially for the federal government to create a federal matching contribution for low and moderate income employees. And so this match will equal 50% of the IRA or retirement plan contribution, for up to a maximum of $2,000 per person. Now, as you would imagine, this match phases out for people who earn, say, $20,500 and up to $35,500 if you're single. Double that number if you're married. And this is also indexed for inflation, by the way. So the IRS will be required to take steps to increase taxpayer awareness, because no one knows about this right now. And I also included a couple of more items on this too. The folks who qualify, no minimum contribution is required for eligibility in this program. You have to be 18 or older. Cannot be claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return. Important to note, and cannot be fully a full-time student for any part of 5 calendar months of the tax year.
Yes, and for all plan sponsors on this call, again, ignore this. Again, it's scheduled for 2027. We've already heard issues with the Department of Labor and the EBSA trying to link the federal system to all of the various payroll and 401k providers systems, like the Lost and Found. We don't think this is going to happen. Again, in a perfect world, again, the federal government would issue, Sally Smith a credit of $500 or $1,000 and would automatically go to, a census in her 401k plan. But to believe that the federal government will be able to move that $500 from the federal government to a census to Sally Smith's account numbered XYZ, and do it properly for 30 to 50 million people, we just don't see it happening. Again, in a perfect world, I think DC thinks that this is easy to solve, but it's certainly not easy. This is going to be very difficult. We've already heard from many of the providers that this is just not going to happen. It is too difficult to try to mirror all those systems to talk to each other.
Agreed. Required minimum distribution changes. So, to start, the start taking RMD went up to 73 for 2023, as most of us know, and to 75 in the year 2033. So, age 73 starting on January 1st, 2023. It's applicable for folks who turned 72 after December 31st of 2022, and a 73 RMD before January 1st, 2033. Now, for folks who are age 75, starting on January 1st, 2033, applicable to those folks who turn age 74 after December 31st, 2032. I think I fall into that last bucket. Also interesting here to note that 50% excise tax that everyone's always concerned about when it comes to RMDs has been lessened. It's gone from 50% to 25%. And it can even go as low as 10% as long as you take your RMD within a timely manner. So it's going, that's excise is going down.
And again, remember, again, for all plan sponsors on this call, if your employees are active at work, they do not need to take out their required minimum distribution. And I get the question, well, what about part-time? Part-time doesn't matter as long as they're active at work and they're not an owner or a 5% owner or a direct family member of a 5% owner. They do not need to take required minimum distributions. So again, even if they go to part-time when they turn 75 or 80, they do not need to take a required minimum distribution.
That's a great point, Steve. Great point. We're already at the half-hour mark, so I'll just skip to Roth plan. Our last, last slide here. Roth retirement plan account RMD. So as of January 1st of this year, Roth dollars no longer subject to the RMD distribution, nor will Roth dollars be included when calculating RMD amounts from traditional IRAs or 401k plans.
Yes, and the other thing that we wanted to cover before we end it and open up to questions is Roth as an employer match or Roth as an employer profit share. That is a question we get a lot. Again, the question was, how will they work? Well, we've got clarification on how that would work. Number one, the plan must be amended to allow matching or employer profit share as a Roth. So you would have to amend the plan document. Those employer match monies must be 100% vested. So you could not have a vesting schedule attached to that employer contribution. Again, that is a big component. A lot of people thought, well, that would be great. I'll do my employer match as a Roth. Well, again, you'd have to have a 100% vesting. There's no way you could take that money back. So you'd have to amend the plan document to have 100% vesting. The employee would then choose, I want to receive my employer match as Roth. The employee must be able to make that change at least once per year. So if they say on January 1st, I want my Roth, my employer monies to be Roth, well, again, they would have that ability to make that change at least once per year. Couldn't be any more than that, but at least once per year, they would be able to make that change. The employer that is making that employer match as a Roth, again, would not withhold any federal taxes. Again, that was always the big issue. Is it going to be a W-2? Is it going to be a 1099? Well, what it's going to be is a 1099 issued by the service provider, so by the 401k company, but no federal taxes, no state taxes are going to come out of that. So that employee that wants that employer match as Roth, well, he's going to have a big tax bill at the end of the year. So again, if he receives, say, $10,000 in match monies, he's going to have the federal taxes, say potentially $2,000 to $3,000 in federal tax monies owed on that. He's going to owe the state, say, an additional, say, $600 or $700. If it happens to be in a city like New York City, you would have an additional, say, 3% tax. So that would be another $300. So again, the employee that does want the employer match as Roth is going to understand he is responsible for this big tax bill that will come at the end of the year. And again, like we mentioned, Fidelity, Empower, whomever would be the service provider would issue that 1099-R at the following year. So if you withheld the match for 2024, in 2025 is when you would get your 1099, where you would have to pay the taxes. Again, remember, you would have federal, state, city. Because the match is not considered wages, you would not have FICA or FUTA associated with it, so there would be no Social Security withholding. But again, you would have state, federal taxes that would be associated with that. So again, service providers need to allow it. There are currently a couple of service providers that do allow employer match as Roth. Not all of them. I would say a minority do. And then again, the employees would then have to, you would have to amend the plan document. The employees would have to opt into it. So it is one of the provisions that we get a lot of questions on. You can do it, but the restrictions are significant. Again, the vesting schedule of being 100% vested, that is a significant issue. So, and again, with that, we will open it up to questions. Again, Ruben, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. And again, if anyone has any questions or would like to schedule complimentary 15 to 20 minutes with our team to walk through any provision of the Secure Act or even student loans, student debt program